What's going on, everyone? Nick or Catalyst here. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are doing well. Today I want to have a subjective conversation with you all about Battlefield 1 because during the past few weeks or so, I've seen many YouTubers and streamers making content talking about how good Battlefield 1 was in comparison to Battlefield 5, which isn't saying much because Battlefield 5 is considered by many to be one of the worst games in the franchise. Since Battlefield 5 is going to have its last update in June, as I keep reminding you all, a lot of people have already started going back to Battlefield 1 and have given it a lot of praise. A little bit too much praise if you ask me. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be the negative Nancy YouTuber and say everybody is wrong for giving Battlefield 1 its due credit, because I, for the most part, had a good amount of fun with Battlefield 1. However, I just think that everybody needs to take their rose-tinted color glasses off and calm down with all of their praise, because there were plenty of issues with the game that I feel people are choosing to overlook right now, and some of those issues laid the groundwork for features and mechanics in Battlefield 5 that people really ended up hating. Now, of course, this is all my opinion, and I really want this to be an open conversation that you all can continue in the comment section below, so I'm interested in what you all think. Was Battlefield 1 really that good, or are people holding it on too high of a pedestal due to the failure of Battlefield 5? Well, it's a little bit complicated. In my opinion, I think Battlefield 1 was a decent Battlefield game, one that looked good on the surface, but once you dove into the gameplay mechanics, it was a deeply flawed game, and one that got worse over time. I think that the state that DICE left Battlefield 1 in could have been a lot better, and when you look at the course of the game's life cycle, it really was a front-loaded experience. After the In the Name of the Tsar DLC, Battlefield 1 was a mostly forgettable game when it came to DLC content. Apart from Passchendaele and Achibaba, the maps in the last two map packs, such as Heligoland Bight and Caporetto, offered experiences that were not only often boring, but also one-sided. Not to mention that a lot of the maps were Conquest Assault, which a lot of players were very outspoken about not enjoying. Game-breaking bugs and the Apocalypse DLC were another factor in Battlefield 1 not really being able to stick the landing. The worst, of course, being a bug in which every time you fired your weapon, your FPS would tank and become nearly unplayable. Of course, that bug was caused by the game tracking too many assignments at once, and dollars will get you donuts. Those experiences were directly related to how DICE handled assignment progression and the UI in Battlefield 5. No tech. The Apocalypse DLC was also the DLC that DICE used to completely butcher the movement system in Battlefield 1 by nerfing the slide practically useless, making the game feel overall clunkier and worse to play. But even so, despite all of that, Battlefield 1 was still able to hold together an impressive player count and be one of the franchise's greatest successes. Why? Because Battlefield 1 had the one thing that Battlefield 5 has never been able to capture, and that one thing is atmosphere. Battlefield 1 was muddy, brutal, intense, and immersive. I find it so ironic that for a game that was marketed as being the most immersive game in the history of the franchise, Battlefield 5 wasn't able to even scratch the surface of the immersion that DICE created with Battlefield 1, no matter how much Redditors cried about the historical accuracy of the game. The game wasn't trying to be anything else other than a gritty depiction of a horrible war, a tribute in a way, and you can definitely see that in the way that DICE presented the war stories and a bunch of the multiplayer maps. And that mattered to players. The tone was consistent from the word go, from the reveal trailer to the DLC packs, everything screamed full-scale war. Meanwhile, with Battlefield 5, we have trailers that range from utterly cringeworthy to completely over the top with a sprinkle of a good trailer every now and again. It's easy to see why when players look back, there is a fondness and desire to play, and the ultimate goal of a video game is to make you want to play it. Not to mention the fact that Battlefield 1, apart from the issues I mentioned earlier, was a game that ran extremely well, and had the smoothest launch of any Battlefield title that came out that decade. Battlefield 1 is admittedly also a joy to look at, and sometimes looks even better than Battlefield 5 currently does. The maps are, on average, decently designed, and legacy bugs aside, the game was very engaging to play. However, once you dove into the gameplay, that's where some people's opinions, including my own, began to become a little bit more negative. If you've played the game, surely you've heard about random bullet spread, and yeah, that is a big reason why a lot of people disliked the gunplay in Battlefield 1. Gunfights felt random, and oftentimes the deciding factor for gunfights was how fast your rate of fire was, which is why the game's balancing became a greater issue as time went on, and more automatic weapons were released into the game, like the Annihilator submachine gun and the Burton LMR. For me personally, I like my bullets to go exactly where I'm shooting, so I'm very partial to the gunplay of Battlefield 3, 4, and 5, and I found the fast rate of fire, random bullet spread meta of Battlefield 1 to be quite irritating. Battlefield 1 was a very casual game when it comes to its gameplay mechanics, and it's something that turned off a lot of veterans of the franchise from the get-go, and those criticisms, in my opinion, are very valid. Of course, Battlefield is a casual franchise, but the thing that was great about Battlefield was that it always combined casual gameplay with more hardcore gameplay mechanics, making it a real best of both worlds type of game that didn't sway too far in any one direction. And then Battlefield 1 comes in like a bat out of hell and rewrites the formula, making the gameplay far too casual, and you can see that a lot in the game's design choices. And of course, Battlefield 1 was an extremely popular title too, that brought in a lot of new fans, but the issue with this is that with Battlefield 1 being so differently designed than any Battlefield game that came before it, it created two types of fans, veterans and new players, and it's impossible to satisfy both, and I think that's very evident with how Battlefield 5's gameplay turned out when DICE did actually try to cater to both. Beyond the gunplay, Battlefield 1 was even more eccentrically casual. Bayonet charge melee attacks that had massive hitboxes, a sweet spot mechanic that rewarded snipers for their inaccuracy with headshots by awarding one-shot body shot kills if you happen to be a certain distance away from them, elite kits that gave players huge advantages simply by being at the right place at the right time and picking up the kit, behemoths that allowed players the opportunity to gain easy kills just because their team was losing, artillery trucks that could camp at the back of the map and be untouchable while they mortared your entire team the entire round, horses that took more bullets to kill than there are days in a year, and I could go on, but I think I've made my point. And dare I say that many players don't like Battlefield 1 because it's really the better game, but because in comparison to Battlefield 5, it's the easier game. Battlefield 5 can be difficult and frustrating if you aren't a seasoned player, and if your first game was Battlefield 1, you weren't ever used to the style of the older games, and I can sympathize and understand why Battlefield 5's gameplay can be disorienting to some players. Hell, that's the reason I made a lot of my guides to begin with. I want to quickly go back to the idea of Battlefield 1 having an incredible atmosphere, which it absolutely does. I'm not going to backtrack on my opinion there, but I do want to acknowledge that part of that immersion and atmosphere coincides with one of the game's debilitating issues, and that, of course, is Battlefield 1's obnoxious nade spam. I think that sometimes players confuse chaos for atmosphere, and I do want to clarify by saying when I'm talking about atmosphere in Battlefield 1, I'm talking about the game's tone, map design, color and lighting, audio and sound design, and all the features that encompasses and surrounds the gameplay. Big explosions and utter chaos does not make a game's atmosphere, and the explosive spam was, in my opinion, Battlefield 1's most consistent issue. And to kind of hammer home that chaos is not the same as immersion and atmosphere, think about how annoying artillery strikes and V1 rockets have become in Battlefield 5. It's kind of like the running stereotype that dudes with big trucks or flashy cars are compensating for something. Just because the game has big explosions doesn't mean that your game has substance, and if you have too many explosions, it feels like you're kind of compensating for the lack of ambiance around your game, and that could definitely be applied to Battlefield 5. So to say that Battlefield 1 had amazing atmosphere despite its glaring explosive spam issue is a true compliment to how well DICE built that game's atmosphere. But of course, that doesn't mean that Battlefield 1 didn't trip over some of the same footfalls that Battlefield 5 ended up tripping over. For instance, both games had a really poor excuse of a progression system, and actually Battlefield 1 had this problem worse than Battlefield 5 did. Once you leveled up and got the rank 10 weapons for each class like the Martini Henry and the Hellregal, there was practically nothing to grind for apart from a higher rank, where at least in Battlefield 5, cosmetics were tied to progression instead of stuck in battle packs. Additionally, Battlefield 1 wasn't the cleanest when it came to delivering new content, as the DLC packs were spaced way too far apart and left players bored because of said lack of progression. Of course, we all know about the disaster that was the Tides of War in Battlefield 5, and truthfully you can't compare the two. Battlefield 5 was infinitely worse, but to act like Battlefield 1 didn't have its pitfalls and instances with its content wouldn't be fair. But that was never too much of a problem because the trump card was that Battlefield 1 managed to be entertaining with its atmosphere while Battlefield 5 was boring. So in conclusion, how good was Battlefield 1? Battlefield 1 was definitely a master at world building, marketing, and atmosphere, with enough addicting qualities to keep players wanting to play the game, even though its second half of its life cycle, especially when it came to content, didn't always do so well. But Battlefield 1's introduction of extremely casual gameplay mechanics that brought in a new conflicting player base to the already current player base and creating inconsistent gunplay made Battlefield 1 a slightly above average iteration of the franchise that couldn't quite stick the landing despite it being the best launch of a Battlefield game during the 2010s. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up nicely, but let me know what you think. How good was Battlefield 1 in your opinion? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like on it, subscribe if you are new here, and turn on post notifications if you haven't done so already. We are playing and streaming a host of different games on Twitch, so follow me on Twitch at Catalyst_HD to hang out with the rest of the Cat Pack and myself. Thank you to all the channel members, follow me on Twitter, and most importantly, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Nick or Catalyst, and I will see you all another time.